Dean Steele, and we're going to be talking today about laughter. That's right. There's a little scripture that says, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but of course, sorrow breaks the bones." So, when was the last time that you actually laughed? Now, I thought this was an interesting little statistic. Did you know that the average child will laugh about 200 times a day? And another survey found that we basically, adults, we laugh about 4 times a day. So the question comes up, what happened to the other 196 times? Very interesting thought. Well, of course, we know that, as you get older, there's things called bills, and there is, of course, stress in life, work, vocation, people. There's lots of reasons why people stop laughing. But I always believe that we should be energy efficient. You say, okay, what do you mean by energy efficient? Well, simply this: it takes more muscles in your mouth to make a frown than it does a smile. So I always believe that we should be energy efficient and we should be, laughing a lot more. Now, there's lots of ways in which you can laugh. One of my favorite ways of doing it is, of course, cartoons and comics. So often what I will do, and I have some favorite comics that I love to, of course, read. For example, Herman. And one of my favorite comics is Herman is sitting in the doctor's office. Doctor says, "Well, let me put it this way." He says, "For your weight, you should be about 37 feet high." And of course, I also love to watch, or I should say, read the, Dennis the Menace. Like the time that he got a phone call and he says, "Really? I don't believe that my son could have done that." He's trying to put on the adult voice. So it's really important that you and I engage in some activity that brings about laughter. For me, for example, I love tickling my youngest grandchildren. I really enjoy that because, for example, Caleb, my youngest grandson, he's just a little over a year old, and he has the biggest giggle and the biggest laughter of anyone that I've ever heard. And then, of course, I do it with my other grandson, whose name is Lewis. He's almost 4. And so here we have all these wonderful little, man, their laughter is absolutely infectious. And it just gets you going when you can get them laughing. Or when, for example, my son has this dog called Oreo. And so I approach him like this, and it goes, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," and he's just a little tiny thing. But you should see just what happens when the kids start laughing. It's do things that, are foolish from time to time. Don't be afraid to let down your hair. You don't have to be, Mr. Serious all the time. We have a little habit in our home. There was a Canadian comedy that was made, Corner Gas. And so we watch Corner Gas, and of course, it is one comic uh, event after another. It's just one little skit after another, and it's just hilarious. What I'm telling you today is, please don't take the life so serious. I love what Dan Betzer said. Dan Betzer, of course, was the radio broadcaster of Revival Time, which used to be a religious program on national broadcasting down in the States. And he said, take the things of God very seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And of course, David did tell us, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine." So have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, having a good sense of humor is actually healthy? And it is. Doctors have told us over and over again that, if you have a funny bone, use it. And also as well, help others as well to have that. And one of my favorite comedians is a guy named Henry Cho. And I love Henry Cho because the simple fact is that, he looks at things at a different perspective. you don't have to there's lots of clean comedy out there. There's lots of it. I listen to it every day. Like Michael Jr. when he talks about Jesus's little brother and the fact that, how much pressure would that be? Jesus is your older brother. His name was James, right? And so can you imagine? I love the skit where he basically says, Jesus turns the water into wine. Well, what happened when the next wedding happened? James is not Jesus Christ. He's just James, right? And so he's standing there, and everybody says, your brother was here last time, and so why don't you turn the water into wine? He says, why are you just standing there with your sandal time? And of course, he goes on with that. There's great comedy out there. Good clean comedy. You don't have to go to the dark side to basically find some good clean comedy. I used to watch Robin Williams because you never knew what he was going to do. And I tell you the truth, when he did Aladdin, I enjoyed that just as much as my kids did. And many, many times, as an adult, you got the joke. My kids are going, what was that all about? That's because a lot of the Disney movies that were done, of course, were for adults, not just for kids. But the point is, let's have a little bit of fun together. And it's great to have fun together. One of the ways that my family has fun is that we start telling of all the different incidences when they were kids. For example, I was doing some renovations on my home in British Columbia. It was just before we sold it. And my daughter was downstairs and I was doing some work on her old bedroom. And she says, Dad, did you know that I snuck through those windows? I looked at him. I said, how could you have gotten through that window? And she kind of smiled and she said, well, I twisted this way and I twisted that way. And she says, we snuck out a lot of nights. I'm going, what? You snuck out? How did you do that? She says, we were very, very sneaky. And it just reminded me of that movie, Mr. Deeds. I'm sneaky. But, it was actually a pretty big giggle because I sat there with this puzzled look on my face, and she started looking and laughing, and she just thought it was the biggest thing. She says, Dad, there's a lot of things we did that you didn't know about. I'm going, are you going to tell me? She says, no, we'll just, it's a secret. It's a mystery. And then she walked out of the room laughing, and I'm going, wow. And then, of course, at supper that night, what we were having with my daughter and her family, and they were telling stories about things and my wife and I, we were just, and they were laughing and having a great old time. And we started laughing with them because we realized, those were years ago. And now we're just finding out about some of the things that our kids were doing. Family times can be just absolutely wonderful. I remember when our kids were little, we had 4 children, and we would be sitting around the table in one particular community called Salmon Arm. Our kids were, basically from about 1 year old to about 11 or 12. And we had 4 kids that were all trying to talk over each other. And my wife and I just sat there, and it was hard. And when you have kids and they do something or they say something, you just, because you gotta be disciplinarian, but it's like, wow. And so it's great to have you gotta have a sense of humor, or else life can be very complicated. Life can be very difficult. So you need to learn how to laugh. You need to learn how to let down your hair if you happen to have some. And if you don't, well, I guess you'll have to think about do something that is funny and be a person who actually has a sense of humor. I love this one incident where I was involved in this accident. It was just when I was just a younger guy. And this guy came out into my lane and he basically hit me, and he comes out, he's really angry. And I come out and I look at him, I say, I guess we met by accident. And it just absolutely, yeah, it just literally, the incident just disappeared. His anger disappeared and he started laughing. He said, you know, you're absolutely right. It can de-escalate a situation so quickly if you use humor and if you use it wisely. So a little thought for you today. Remember, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but sorrow breaks the bone. Don't let it break your bones. Have a little humor today. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Of course, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, you press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel.